Hello, hello, hello. It's very nice for you to click on this video. I am Sean, also known as Eccentric Brat, and I just wanted to introduce my interview series that I am starting. I want to do like a video every 2 weeks where I interview an author whose work I love very dearly. And first up is Sienna Tristen, who I'm privileged to call a friend. And the good news and the bad news about this interview is that because it's my first time, I haven't fully grasped the art of technology. So it's in speaker view. So the good news about that is that you get to see Sienna's wonderful face in full screen. But the bad news is that when a couple times Sienna asks me a question and I nod, but you can't see it, so it kind of looks like I'm ignoring them. But I promise you that's not the case. One thing that comes up in this interview is my chronic anxiety, and I guess it's coming out full force in this introduction. But yeah, I won't dilly dally too long. Thank you for venturing on this writing interview journey with me. I'm doing it both out of selfishness and selflessness. I want to learn from the authors, but I also want to like spread the word of great people. I won't go on for too long. Thank you. Bye. All right. Hello. Welcome everybody to my very first interview with an author that I know and that I respect. In my opinion, one of the best fantasy lyricists, and best delvers of emotional truths in
Mm.
fiction, Sienna Tristen. Sienna, hello. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining me. And who are you? What's your story?
Who are you? Why are you here?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. Hello, dear viewers. My name is Sienna Tristen. I use they, them pronouns. I am a poet. I'm an author. I'm a cultural worker. My sort of claim to fame currently is that I spent about 10 years writing a very chunky fantasy duology called The Heretic's Guide to Homecoming. It's got two parts, and like any good interviewee, I brought props. So here's the first one. She has a very distinctive cover. She's chunky, but she's not as chunky as her younger sister. It's number two. Together, they make a fantastic doorstopper, or a fantastic couple of weeks if you're in the mood to escape this world and tumble headfirst into another. So that's my fiction work. I also, as I mentioned, I'm a poet. I have a couple of chapbooks out. One of them is very difficult to find because it was limited edition letterpress. It's called The Insomniac's Assistant, and is kind of like a very short novel in verse. The other one is a chapbook called Hortus Animarum, a new herbal for the queer heart. That one won the Frog Hollow chapbook contest a couple of years ago before, unfortunately, like so many small presses, Frog Hollow folded. So I issued a second reprint myself, being that I am also, among my other hats, a layout designer. I'm a graphic designer, I'm a layout designer. So I was able to reissue a beautiful print done by Coach House Press in Toronto. So that one is still out there and available for people to find. So this is kind of a little banquet of my work. Yeah, and I'm so excited to be here with you, Sean.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And that resourcefulness that you did with like redoing that book is evident in your well, I don't want to get too into like the audiobook yet, but it's an
We'll get
amazing
there.
production. It's impressive. I listened to the sample that's available in your Kickstarter, and I
Yeah.
encourage everyone to do that. And I just want to like, before we get into the text, I just want to give notice to the audiobook because it is currently having a Kickstarter, and I want to start with that because that's important. I've read both books. I I'm rereading the first book now. I wanted to like reread the whole thing before this interview, but I underestimated how chunky the book is and how I didn't want to like speed through it. It's definitely a book that you would savor, and I do think that is ideal for an audiobook where as long as like you don't go to 2 times speed, which I wouldn't do with you because you're a trained performer. I would imagine like you get to really uh, swim and luxuriate in the words. But so, with that said, how did the Heretic's Guide to Homecoming come to be? What was the germ of that idea, and how did it evolve into like over 1,000 pages of fiction?
Ooh, okay. Well, Like I said, it took about 10 years from start to finish to write and publish both books. It was a little under 10, like 9.5, but we round up in this house. So that's a very long time in a human life to dedicate oneself to a single project, right? To get a little grim about it for just a second, how many more of those do I have left in this life, right? So it was very much something that had to keep my attention and keep my interest and my love for all of that time. And so it changed with me over time, right? But the absolute bedrock concept of it is kind of hidden in the name. So when my partner Avi and I, who both run the Shale Project, which is a multimedia arts collective, when we pitch this series, this duology to people, our tagline is that it's a mental health narrative disguised as a fantasy travelogue. So on the surface, not that it's trite, but on the surface, what you have is sort of a road trip fantasy between two characters who are um, going on foot through multiple cultures, multiple landscapes, meeting all kinds of colorful secondary characters who have their own stories and myths to tell, and all of these sort of accrete and layer on to the experience that the protagonist is having. So you get to see a whole bunch of the cultures of the secondary world that we world build, which is called Shale. But what's going on underneath that surface for the duration of the story is essentially this protagonist, whose name is Renoa, has some pretty yikes mental health stuff going on. Like, he is riddled with chronic anxiety and depression and self-esteem issues and all of this. And it is really ruling his life, certainly in the first half of the duology. And the story is ultimately about that quest to understand and come to terms with himself, with where he has and has not failed himself and the people he cares about, and how to essentially meet life on terms that are a little bit more confident with the help of a whole bunch of people who kind of, show up and help out as they see fit. So that's the sort of scales that are balanced in the Heretic's Guide duology, right? On the one hand, we have this beautiful travel story that is just like beautiful vistas and mysteries and ruins and interesting cuisine and songs and all of these things. And on the other hand, there is this very squishy cinnamon roll who is trying his darndest to get out of his own way and to actually feel worthy of the adventure that he's on. So that's what's going on in Heretic's Guide. So the reason why I say that the kind of the seed for it is kind of hiding in the name is because when I was in undergrad, which is when I started this project, I was doing a lot of research into psychology, a lot of research into self-improvement, self-development, mindset, meditation, contemplative traditions, like all of this stuff, right? Partially because it was my area of study alongside linguistics, which is the other thing that I did academically, and partially because I was going through it, right? Like so many 20-somethings are, right? And I know myself well enough to know that I am a stubborn little bastardo, and I am going to remember like ways to take care of myself much better if I see them embedded in fiction rather than like a TED Talk or a textbook or a life hack article. Like that just doesn't stick with me the same way that a good old-fashioned story does, right? And so, as a favor to future me, I was like, well, what if I take everything that I have learned, that I have observed, that I have on good evidence works, and find ways to work it into a narrative so that it is gripping enough for me to want to come back to it and revisit things when I personally am feeling low in some way, right? And along the way, I found out, like we all do, that I'm not the only one who has these problems. What? And perhaps other people could benefit from this as well, and like also have my weird, like I'll only listen to it if it's in a epic fiction, you know? And that's why I decided to publish it. But yeah, that's where it started.
Yeah, well, I mean, your skills in linguistics and mental health are very evident. I called you a master of lyricism and delving into emotional truths, and nothing is like exhibited more than reading your book. So Renoa, some books deal with anxiety, but Renoa, I think your portrayal of him is like you go into it. I remember I was rereading a passage where Renoa is contemplating about whether he should like go on his journey, um, and it's like pages and pages of his swirling thoughts with like a musicality that didn't get dull, but it also felt like
Mm.
painfully true and painful. I have chronic anxiety too. I don't think I have it to the level of Renoa.
You
Also,
do.
like also like I will say that this book, like especially rereading it while confronting like my anxiety, was so helpful because I was like, okay, I think Renault is overreacting, but like I have those thoughts. Am I overreacting? Is this like so? I think like looking at fiction both as like a mirror of seeing yourself, the way you've portrayed, and also like there's like a distance to that's not you, even though like you've internalized those feelings, so you can kind of separate it and see like okay, I have those feelings, but like now when I'm seeing it from like a perspective that's out of my own head, I can see that there is a way out of it. And I do like the I don't want to spoil too much about the book because I want everyone to read it, but I do like the healing journey that Renoa goes on. Um
It has a happy
so
ending, I promise. It's
yeah, no,
rewarding.
it does, it does, it does.
It'll put you through the
And
ringer, but it will reward you.
it puts you through the ringer, but it also has um so your book confronts some promotional truths, but it also is in a fantasy world, which is
Mhm.
typically associated with escapism. So, what was your, uh, why did you choose to meld both like heavy mental health issues with a magical, fantastical world?
I love that you've asked this question because it is essentially, you already said the words. It is perspective and it's distance. It's both of those things at once. So with Hernoa, specifically with his anxiety, which is like quite a lot, like I will not sugarcoat it. It requires a brave reader to work through that with him, right? Because it can feel very overwhelming, even just reading it as an observer, right? That's by design. I was getting really tired of the concept of anxiety being sort of like a cute quirk, being like, oh no, they're just a little self-conscious or shy, and like one good talk from a friend or a mentor will like sort them right out. And like, that's not how it works. Like, Sean, is that how that worked for you? Because it's not how it works for me. If it worked for anybody else, congrats, right? But most of the time, chronic mental health does not simply go away with like one quick fix, right? Or 100 quick fixes. It is a constant negotiation. I don't want to use the word battle because that's like needlessly aggressive and not really the point. The point is it's a conversation, right? Between you and the thing that is in you that is trying at different times to sabotage and protect you. Like it's very complicated, right? And so I wanted a space to get gritty enough with it that like it really tests the patience of people who are around Renoa as well, like other characters, right? Like some of them do get fed up with him, and they have every right to be. Because I wanted to bring to light some of the more uncomfortable truths about anxiety, which is the stuff that we don't often talk about. I am personally very grateful to live in an era of counterculture where we are talking about mental health and mental illness as freely as we are. Like I am so, it was not like this 20 years ago, right? I am so happy that we are at a point where it's become very mainstream to understand mental health issues. And also, and also, um, just because you have mental health issues does not protect you from being an asshole. Right? These things go hand in hand. And it's not always, and it's again very complicated and case by case issue, but every once in a while, Renoa will do something or say something or not do something or whatever. And there are repercussions, right? There are consequences. There is a certain point at which a character that he admires a lot essentially looks at him and is like, you are self-obsessed. Like, you may not have thought about it that way before, but this is what's going on. What do we want to do about this, right? And it's like a huge shocker, but it's true. And I wanted space to be able to really dig in with that because I just had not seen it anywhere before to the point where you actually do feel like you're seeing a mirror of a real life experience, right? You're not the first person to tell me that like they feel uncomfortably seen, right, by what's going on with Renoa, right? It's because I wanted it to not be glossed over. So that was a part of that. But when it comes to the fantasy piece, um, and I know that you've done a lot of work in the speculative fiction space in general, Sean, so I'm sure this will not come as a surprise to you, just as a genre, right? But speculative fiction is really good at tackling these issues without spooking people, because you're able to craft a level of distance where you can come at an issue kind of walking sideways like a crab, and in so doing, allow it the breathing room so that people can actually let it sit with them long enough to begin to metabolize it, right? It's not like they're directly confronted with something that feels preachy or prescriptive. They are just sort of sitting with it, and it's kind of part of the story, and it's enmeshed in there. And over time, perhaps maybe, if you're the kind of reader who takes things away from a story like that, you begin to realize that maybe there are connections that you can make with your own life, or there are lessons to be learned, or something to reflect on, right? So that's why I love doing this kind of heavy work in fantasy and spec fic specifically, because of the fact that it allows you to kind of like thread it in there without being too obvious. And I say that after having said like Renault is really obviously anxious, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I do see like the oblique appeal of fantasy, and I think you do that so well. You make it I don't know if digestible is the right word, but you make it like it's not as overwhelming when you have like some fantasy stuff in the corner. And I also
Yep.
think that you do a good job of using fantasy as a tool to not only come up with like your own original language, like vocabulary of
Hmm.
places, but also fantasy is able to like transcend the language of contemporary fiction by just going to places that can't be described in simple words or simple reality. And you have that in several like stories within the stories, which arrive at like they're so imaginative. They're
Thank you.
so well written. Like if back when I was at Augur, which for those who don't know is like a short fiction magazine, if I
It's
saw
really
any of
good, and
those,
you should submit there. It's
yeah,
and
you
also read
should,
it. It's very
you
good.
should. If I saw any of those stories submit like just standalone to Augur when I was a first reader there, I would like pick it up immediately and like
Thank you, Sean.
camp. But you did the thing where like you wrote a great story about mental illness, and then you wrote more stories within those stories, and then you had those stories it come to emotional truths that like can't be described in contemporary fiction, and it's just like a I guess it's just a showcase of like the power of fantasy and the power of speculative fiction when you're operating like adult, and you're also operating at like a linguistic level that's like next level, like Sophia Samatar, Cat Valenti level of
Thank you.
lyricism. Um, with that said, I haven't read Stranger in Elandria, but if or Elandria, I think, but it seems very Stranger in Elandria coded, and I think you said when I was at the book launch for practice, whenever that was, that was
Yeah.
one of your inspirations. So was that in your
Yes.
one of your inspirations, and was there any others?
Oh yeah, hugely. In fact, I don't think I've ever told anyone this out loud, but I'll tell it to you, Sean. And so, dear viewers, there is a dedication at the beginning of the second book, right? And the dedication reads for Pico and Santiago and that pepper merchant's son. And the pepper merchant's son is referring to Jevik, who is the protagonist of Sophia Samatar's Stranger in Alondria. Pico is the main character in a book by Keith Miller called The Book of Flying. And Santiago comes from Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. And these were three like very early on formative um, stories that like just eventually found themselves in the bedrock of the duology. Like it eventually kind of took flight and did its own thing. But when I think about who I have to thank for that little seed germ that you were talking about, it is that trifecta, right? So they're all in there as a thank you, right? The authors for sure, but also their characters. So for sure, I mean, Sofia Samatar is one of my favorite authors, hands down. Not only is her lyricism next level, but also the imagination of world building, the theme work. Oh my goodness, right? The thing that Sofia Samatar can do with a theme, or a motif, incredible, right? So there was a lot early on in because this also was my debut. Like I feel like I should mention that these also were my first books. Like some people have novels that they write and then they trunk, which is a term that is basically you slide it in a desk drawer somewhere and never look at it again. And then you do a different one. And like eventually you get to a point where you feel like you have created something that is publishable. That didn't happen for me. I just worked and worked and worked on this sucker until I was like, she's ready. And then I hit go, right? So it was very important to me super early on to have books that other people had written that were sort of talismans of, yes, you are allowed to write like this, even though it is not particularly mainstream. You are allowed to write paragraphs about the way that the light filters through the trees if you feel like it is doing work, like if you feel like it's going to move somebody. You are allowed to go absolutely ham on the alliteration and the sibilance and the for effect. Like you can go as hard as you want if that's what brings you joy. Because here's a whole bunch of other people who have done this and you love their work, right? So that was very much the relationship to those texts early on, and they still have a very tender place in my heart. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna pivot, go back to like the story. I'm gonna go back to the stories within the stories because
Please.
I know that you did something special for some of them with your audiobook. I'm gonna pivot to that now
Mm-hmm.
for a bit. Um, I encourage everyone to listen to the sample because if you are not sold by my words, like I don't know, you might not know who I am, you might have just stumbled on this video, then Sienna's words accompanied by music that is originally composed is available on the sample. So can you talk about how you worked on a production as like ambitious as that for your audiobook?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who doesn't know yet, it has been the first book came out in 2018, and ever since then, people have been asking me here and there, "Hey, when's an audiobook version gonna come out?" Either because they've heard me do a reading in, at a convention or something, and they're like, "I would like that for 20 hours," or because of accessibility reasons, right? It's just that that's how people prefer to consume their fiction, and they're curious because they want to hop on board. And the reality of it is that audiobooks are not cheap to make, right? Especially ones of a like studio level quality requires studio tech, either a literal actual studio to record in, or at the very least, high grade microphones and so on and so forth. I know that there are some people who've done absolute magic tricks by like putting up moving blankets in like a closet and stuff, and more power to y'all, right? But for a long time, it was financially prohibitive for an indie artist like myself to create this piece, this alternate edition of things until, um, well, essentially until I met my co-creator Brendan. So, as we've mentioned before, Avi is my partner when it comes to the world of Shale. We world build the planet together, we write fiction together, we're publishing partners, partners in life, crime, and art, right? Brendan came in for the audiobook piece, and he is the complementary set of skills that make this possible. Like, he brings the audio, and I bring the book. You know what I mean? So, he's an audio engineer, he is a composer, he's been a music teacher for like 20 years. His family runs a music studio and like music teaching business. So, like, it is very much the water that he swims in as a little fish, right? And he also happens to have a rocket recording studio in his basement. So, all of a sudden things become much easier just from a practical perspective to do a project like this. Now, when it comes to making this an audiobook that feels like the experience of reading the text of Heretic's Guide, I was adamant that there should be more than just narration. There should be more than just me reading the words. I do love to perform the words. I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it over the years. But I've listened to a lot of music while I was writing that thing. That it very much is sort of, again, another thing that's embedded and interwoven into the text. Like a lot of the musicality comes from the fact that I, like so many neurotic writers, have to craft the perfect environment before I start writing. And for me, a huge part of that is the tunes, right? Is like, am I able to sit and marinate in the correct emotional atmosphere before I start typing my little words? And a lot of that comes from music. So when time came to do the audiobook, I was like, I would really love for there to be original composition, original score that, again, supports the work, right? So the audiobook for book one is looking to be about 20 hours long. Like we said, she's chunky. There's not going to be 20 hours of music because that would be quite overwhelming, right? But there will be ambient sort of soundscaping, rain noises when we're in rainy place, if we're in a cavern, there will be like a slight echo, just stuff that draws you in. But for the stories within story that you're talking about, Sean, we wanted to do something very special. So there are four stories that are set apart in the first part of the duology as sort of in-world legends, in-world myths, which are told to Renoa via a different character. It's told in italics in the text. That's kind of how they're signified. It's like, oh, this one of these is getting queued up, right? There's like a little flower design, and then we just go right into it. And that's a very difficult signpost from an audio perspective. You can't be like, and then there's a little flower, and now imagine this in italics. Like, it doesn't work that way. So we were thinking about other ways to auditorily signify that something different was going on, something an extra layer deep was going on. And then we had the idea, why don't we score fully the short stories? So the demo that is on the Kickstarter campaign is about 15 minutes long. It is an excerpt from chapter 7, and it includes the in-world legend, the folktale of Birdhouse Girl. And this is, like you mentioned, Sean, it's a standalone story, so you can listen to it, read it without any prior context. You don't need to know anything about this boy and why he's here. You can just enjoy it for its own sake as a folktale. And it is essentially a ballet, is how I think of it, really. Especially because the people who are telling the story come from a culture that is very based in theater, very based in the performing arts. Like they're literally professional storytellers who are delivering this tale, right? And so we actually kind of had the fun idea that, like, what if this is kind of diegetic? Like, what if this music is like the actual music that the performers would put on like a more like if you were to go to an opera house or a ballet or a theater or something in one of their cities and they put on the Birdhouse Girl, which everyone knows, right? This is the music that they put on, and like you could just watch people dance or whatever and like know the story because it's in the swell of the music what is happening. And that was the other thing that was really exciting was what the process was that I narrated the piece, like I recorded it, and then we sat down with the recording and started blocking out essentially emotional movements, right? This thing is like it has movements. It's so exciting. And sections and motifs and themes. So like Birdhouse Girl, who is a character in this story, and then her counterpart, who is known colloquially as the Poison Boy, um, they each have a theme and they each have an instrument that represents them. And those will show up and interweave throughout the piece, right? As they are doing stuff in the story, which is just so cool. Like, it's a world that I had never been able to really play in, Sean. Like, I have a lot of musical appreciation. I have a very fine-tuned ear, but I don't have any musical training. So then Brendan comes along with all of this expertise, right? And, like, by the way, this boy is able to play literally every instrument except for one, the French horn, the one that got away, right? So I'm able to like hum a melody line or something, and he can just grab the keyboard or a guitar or whatever and be like, oh, like this, and like do it, which is incredible to me. It's like magic. And so together we were very much hip to hip for the whole composition process. And I think that collaboration has resulted in something really special.
Yeah, it does sound like it's gearing up to be that. And I know you have a history in performing. So there's nothing that I love more than audiobooks that are read by authors who know how to read, and there's nothing I hate more than audiobooks read by authors who don't know how to read. You're one of the former. So
Yes, I am blessed.
the reason I love when authors read is because they understand the text more than anyone, and there's a musicality to your language that seems pretty like intuitive when you're reading it. Like it just comes to like it when I'm reading it, like the musicality just comes to me. It doesn't take much to parse. But you wrote this book in well, like I think it came out in 2018.
That's right.
So it's been a while. So when you were reading it, did the language like come pretty instinctually back to you, or did you have to work to regain it?
Oh, not at all. Yeah, it invited me right back in, which was such a homecoming, let's say it. Um, right. Before I publish anything, whether it's a poem or a piece of fiction or an essay or whatever, I do read it to myself out loud. Like that's part of my revision process because I want to make sure that it feels good in the mouth to read and feels good in the ears, in the inner ear to hear, right? That there is that rhythm, that cadence, that musicality. And so I don't hit publish on anything until I feel like it's hit that point of crystallization, right? Where it's like, every time that I return to this paragraph, I read it the same way. I remember reading it this way last time, right? That means it's finally hit a rhythm that is consistent, right? That has like structural integrity. And so that process, the whole book underwent that process a very long time ago, right? But that means that when I pick it up after I haven't touched it in a year, 2 years, 4 years, whatever, right? Haven't looked at, certainly there are some passages in the book that I have not touched since they were published. Others I will crack out to read to people once in a while, right? But it's 2025, so it's been a long time. But there is still this like ghost of a memory somewhere in my, my language processing center somewhere in my brain, that remembers the feel of the words and how they're supposed to go together and how they dance together. And so a lot of the time in the recording booth, when we have to do retakes, it is mostly because of the fact that the world has made a noise, like a car has driven by, or Brendan's three cats are tussling upstairs, or something is going on, right? It is very rarely because of the fact that I want to do a retake because I feel like I've flubbed something. Birdhouse Girl, which is the demo that you're hearing, I don't, as a rule, I don't boast about this just to boast about it. It's mostly to illustrate my point for your question, right? But Birdhouse Girl was taken in one take. Like I just said, hit record, Brendan, and enjoy the show. And then I did the thing as if I were performing at an open mic or a convention. And then I did it and we hit done and we're like, that's the take. Like, there you go, right? So the short stories are like that because they had an even more condensed refinement, right? Um, but yeah, it's been an absolute joy and a surprise, but like maybe it shouldn't be that much of a surprise to discover that it is still buried in me. At any point it can be exhumed, right? It can be brought back to life, and we can go again.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, so you mentioned how like for Birdhouse Girl, which I'll stick to, since it's the demo, how like the music clashes and interweaves. Was that a thing that you collaborated on with Brendan, or was it all Brendan who came up with like the themes, or did yeah,
I love this because it is so illustrative of the kind of collaboration that this project has birthed and which I've never had the chance to experience before. So the way that it worked, we had never worked collaboratively before, like on a creative project. We were friends, but we were like, he's also my DM. Like he ran my first D&D campaign. So like we have that kind of relationship, right? Very emotionally vulnerable from the get-go, as you do in D&D. But we're working on this project, and the intention originally was that I was going to do the narration and then I was going to leave it with him and he was going to compose something and then I might offer some feedback. That's not how it went. Um, because essentially what happened was he did some of that work and he invited me over to have a listen. And he'd written something that was nice. It did the job. There were themes. They did interweave with each other. Um, and these were his words, not mine, after I gave my feedback. They were basic. They were basic. Like again, it got the job done, but it wasn't what I would think of as, yes, the soundtrack to my novel, right? So, as an example, the first thing that happened was he had this fantastic rhythm section, which like sounded great on top of everything else that was going on. And I listened to it and I sat there in the chair and I had that moment, which if you've done collaborative writing or collaborative art, Sean, you might know this moment when you are about to deliver a piece of feedback that is constructive criticism and you don't know whether it's going to be received well. Right? Because
yeah,
you've never jumped that hurdle before. You're like, okay, we're about to find out what kind of artist you are and like how much ego you bring to the table. Here we go,
yeah,
right? And I opened my mouth and I went, this is a beautiful rhythm section. Get rid of it. Just all of it. And like, by the way, it's hard to digitally record a rhythm section. Like that took work on his part, right? But I was like, get rid of it. And he was like, okay, why don't you explain why? And my answer was, well, my speaking is the rhythm section, right? All of the sibilants in the S's and all of the plosives, like that is a percussion section, right? And trying to have that compete with drums and shakers and all of these things would just create too much noise. And after a little while, it wasn't that long, he was like, no, you're right, actually. And that is the kind of thing that I never would have thought of because I'm not used to composing for a narration. And so from that moment on, we were like, let's sit side by side and let's do this together. And essentially what happened was I took the basic themes that he composed, which are still existing. They're still in the story. The Birdhouse Girl theme and the flute and the Poison Boy theme on the trumpet. are the original themes that he wrote down. But then I got to sit down and be like, okay, let's transform them in interesting ways. And what if we swap to 4/4 time for a little bit in this bit? And what if we do Birdhouse Girls theme, but in Poison Boy's key to like signify that they're having an interact, like all of these things. And then from there, it just became so many very late nights and early mornings of us sitting in Brendan's studio and going absolutely nutso working on this thing and getting just 1 minute at a time, 30 seconds at a time of material and just like being so excited about it because there is nothing like having that like if you've ever I've seen this in a few places. I've only had the opportunity to do it once. If anyone out there is watching and has the opportunity to either participate or attend something like this, please do it. If you've ever been to a reading where they have an improv band, like a jazz band or something that improvs music behind the readers, it is so cool. And like props to all the improv bands who are able to do that with just like a cursory glance at like somebody's poem or something. They're like, oh yeah, we've got the vibe. Because then you just feel like supported. Like you feel like there's this wave of I don't know, like artistic encouragement that is coming along with your words, and it just becomes this whole other experience. And that is how it felt. But we got to orchestrate it literally, right? We got to decide when those moments were going to come up, when we were going to pull back, when we were going to sweep forward, all of these things, right? So it wound up being, at the end of the day, uh, a completely 50-50 process where I like to, he is my hands ultimately because I cannot play an instrument, right? My only instrument is right here. This is what I've got, right? But that's enough when you have a partner like Brendan at the helm of every other instrument, right? So it was absolutely a collaborative experience, and I'm so excited to get to do it like 8,000 more times.
Yeah, well, speaking of 8,000 more times, how many more thousands of times do you have until you finish the audiobook for the first book? Like, are you nearing the finish line? Are you halfway through? Um,
We are 2 chapters away from finishing the recording, the narration of book one. So, to anyone for whom this means something, we have arrived at Baz and Jespera. We have arrived at the cousins. Um, so that's been very interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, right? But we're nearing the end of the narration. And what that means is we get to then go and start really hammering out the composition, the music, the sound effects, the ambience, all of this stuff, the production, right? Because we've been splitting it kind of. It's been like if we don't have if the muse has not come down and poked us in the nose and gone, you shall work on music today, then we're doing narration. But if we're like bit by the music bug, then we put all of that to the side because the book is there. She'll wait, right? She's not going anywhere. And we'll work on composition. Birdhouse Girl is so far the only complete composition that we have, which is another reason why we chose it for the demo because it kind of it demonstrates the full vision. But we do have working demos of themes for Renoa and for Raylan, which are so fun, and I'm so excited about them, and so excited to share them. And it's going to be very cool because all the characters are also going to have their own themes. Places are going to have their own themes or their own instrumental palettes. And those are going to sort of gently emerge and subside throughout the narrative, not in the same way as Birdhouse Girl, where it's like a full production, but just like a couple of notes here or like a little strain of chorus there when something important happens, as sort of, again, a signpost that this is a word to pay attention to, right? So, so much music is in my near future, Sean, and I'm psyched about it.
that's amazing. So, um, I I think in your Kickstarter you say you want to finish the audiobook by October of next year. So,
Yep.
is that when you plan on like getting all the music done and the last finishing touches?
That's right. Yeah. So we essentially are trying to give ourselves as much grace as possible because of the fact that neither one of us is a full-time artist. Like I wish we were, right? I wish this could just be my job. But unfortunately, we both have to pay the bills, right? So this is literally being scraped out in the midnight hours. We are usually working between the hours of 11 p.m. and 3 in the morning, which is insane. But the things we do for art, there you go. Um, and so we wanted to give ourselves as much of a buffer as possible because, much like the actual writing of the duology, good work takes time, right? Um, it doesn't matter how talented either one of us or both of us are. If we don't have time to sit on ideas and mull them over and iterate, it's not going to be up to the level of timeless quality that we hope for it to be. So next year, October of 2026, is the 4-year anniversary of the completion of the duology. That's when book two was published in late October of 2022. And so we are hoping to time a release for that book anniversary, which gives us a little bit under a year to get running. Because again, it takes a long time to come up with that much material. I think there's going to be probably about 2 hours of music all told. Maybe more than two when you get all of the character themes and stuff into it. But like that's like two solid albums worth, which is a lot when you really think about it, right? Plus all of the other work that goes into an audiobook, like cleaning it up, getting the car and the cat noises out of the recording, like all of this stuff, right? So there's a long way to go, but we've almost hit the first real milestone, which is finish the voice part, right? So that's very exciting. But yes, you can expect this to arrive in October of 2026. And if you're the kind of person who enjoys audiobooks and wants to partake in this one, the Kickstarter is pricing the audiobook at a lower price than it will be when it's available for retailers. So this is the cheapest you're ever going to get it. This is the special backer discount, and it will be a little bit more expensive when it's released in October. So you have a chance now to get in at an early discount rate.
Either way, it's worth it, but it's worth it more if you do it now.
Well,
So
because there's also goodies, right? That's what I
yeah,
love about a Kickstarter is if you are a fan of this book, there's also a whole bunch of special features that you can lay your hands on. There is I have probably 20,000 words of special, like deleted scenes, essentially, that are still on my hard drive that didn't make it into the final book, but which are, in my opinion, readable. And I'm planning on releasing these to backers of a certain tier in case people are like, I kind of wonder what would have happened if they had made this choice and not that choice. Like, I have an answer for you, and it's in this PDF, right? So that's one thing. Brendan and I are going to record a 90-minute podcast talking about the making of the project, which you can access through a certain tier level. If you are curious about this project but not an audiobook person, if that's just not your preferred medium, there is a tier to back where you just get the music, where you just get the album, which is something that a lot of people might find interesting to listen to on long drives or while they're writing their books or whatever it is, right? We care about no AI fantasy music in this house, right? So that is something to look at as well. So there's something for everybody in the Kickstarter.
yeah. I mean, it's just like a testament to the power of human creativity. Um, like you're hitting on all fronts. You're hitting on like human-made music, words that are out of this world. Your words, your performance, which is, as you said, like an instrument of your own that Brendan learned to use. Um, yeah, it's really exciting. I'm so happy for you, and I I know you're still working on the audiobook for book one, but is book two like is that in your mind? I obviously it's like not. I would imagine it's not at the forefront because you got to get this done first. But yeah,
We got to get one done before we think about two, but I will tell you that until we put a Kickstarter together, like until we decided that we wanted to be paid for our time, essentially, right? That's what the Kickstarter is funding, is making it so that we can do this and also pay our bills. Um, we were considering just doing the narration for both books all in one go, right? Now, of course, we're not going to do that anymore because, like I mentioned before, composition and production takes time, and we want to be ensuring that the first book comes out in a timely manner. But it was always the vision to get both of these suckers done. So absolutely, there will be a book two. It's going to happen. We're not going to do the very sad thing that sometimes happens when you have a beautiful first book or two books out of three, and then the last one simply never comes. I could not do that to anyone. I could not do that to you, Sean. So no, no, book two will be on the way.
yeah. I mean they're chunky books, but at least there's only two of them. So like, and there's like they're done. So you don't have to worry about like writing anymore. You just have to worry
Yeah.
about performing them. Um, I I want to ask while we have time, what made you like? Why are you so enamored by the power of lyricism and character development over like the plottiness that is in most traditionally published stuff? What do you gravitate towards for that?
I love this. Thank you so much for asking this question. I feel like I learned a lot about how to be a human by reading books, especially when I was a kid, but even now. For those who don't know or who haven't guessed, I'm neurodivergent. I have that goodtism. And social stuff has traditionally been baffling to me for a lot of reasons, right? Um, and when I was younger and learning how to like exist on planet Earth, reading was how I was able to interact with, the interiority of other human beings in a way that felt safe, ultimately, right? Is what that was. And so whenever I find fiction, whenever I read books that dive back into that, that are like really close, really tender, really spacious containers for character work, they're insta faves. Like I love them, right? Because it reminds me of that, and because I still love a book as a methodology for exploring the human interiority, right? I think that's what a book is exceptionally good at, better than a movie, say. Movies are great with spectacle, they're great with emotion. Books are really great for interiority. There's a lot going on inside of a human at any given time that a screen doesn't necessarily show, right? There are character actors out there who can really work it, right? In the face, and that's fantastic. But for me, as a medium, books are just where it's at when it comes to that kind of work. And the other thing is the word piece, right? I have just a huge love of the word as a technology. I think language is probably humanity's best technology, after maybe the dog. Those two things are like kind of like it's really anyone's game, right? It depends on the
Yeah,
day.
as a dog owner, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
Right?
Yeah.
But language is, I mean, again, I spent 5 years studying it academically, and that only increased my awe for it as a communication piece, as an expressive piece. Language is fantastic. Language is culture. Culture is language. These things are intertwined with each other. And I love playing with it. It's a Play-Doh that I just love to knead into different shapes, right? It is a medium like anything else. And so when I find books, when I find stories that are unabashedly jazzed to be doing the lyrical thing, I also fall in love with them. That's the Stranger in Alondria of it all, right? That's the um Catherine Addison of it all. That's like all of these things, right? Is like, did you want poetry in your prose? Here you go, right? And I'm like, yes, I do. More, please. Thank you. So it is, of course, something that shows up in my own writing because it's what I want to see more of in the world, right? I think that um, music in general can accomplish things that words alone cannot. John O'Donohue, who is somebody that I turn to a lot in terms of texts, he was a poet, he was a theologian. He's no longer with us anymore, but when he was around, he said, music is what language would love to be if it could. And I think that is so true. And so the closest that I can get to doing music without literally doing music, which is what the audiobook is so cool for, right? But in a text, the closest that I can get to language becoming music is that lyricism, right? Is that inherent movement and rhythm. And so it is something that has my whole heart, and I don't think I'm ever going to stop doing it.
Yeah, I mean that's a testament to like your understanding of literature and what it's capable of, and like it nothing like I don't hate novels that are like and then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, but I'm also like you could just write a screenplay. I'm not getting much out of it. I'm not like I don't mean to be selfish, but like I'm not learning much about it. Like just get
Mm,
into their head, make me swim with the words, make me learn about the characters instead of
yeah,
just the plot. Like I feel like I'm just watching from like a bird's eye view and I'm not really getting access. And
yeah.
your books are the opposite of that, where it's like all access all the time. And then there's also pretty words that are like decorating it that give it a luster. So thank you for
Including the
like
ones that I made up.
yeah, yeah,
Like I just dead ass made up like 5 languages for this book, right?
yeah,
Conlanging or fantasy languages is like a huge um love of mine and a hobby of mine, right? Like kind of in the Tolkien tradition of Elvish and Dwarvish and so on. But also other creators have made very cool languages. And like it's the dorkiest art form ever. But it is extremely satisfying to, as an example, pull out my party trick where I will show up somewhere and say, "Oh, do you want me to write your name in Italione, which is Renoa's language?" Like I have the script as well, right? I've created that, and to be able to just do it, like I think about it for a second and then I do it, and it's like not I'm not faking it, right? It's not just like whatever. So when you said a little bit earlier about how books that are narrated by their authors benefit from the author's deep knowledge of the text. I would say that that is perhaps even more so with a fantasy work like this because I also made up a bunch of words and would have to coach someone so hard on how to say all of the words when instead I could just say the words myself, you know?
Yeah, and for this one, you might be the only one who has full access to the whole text,
Yeah.
which
Well,
makes
soon
yeah
you'll
makes
all get it as well, right?
yeah soon we'll get access. Um, I think I am out of questions and we're almost out of time, but I will, Sienna, please tell us where to find you. I will also have like the link to the Kickstarter and all your socials that
Great.
you mentioned down below for those who are watching. But yeah, anything you want to plug, anything you want to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go take a peek at the Kickstarter. It is over on November 28th of this year, 2025. If you are too late, please come to the Kickstarter page anyway and take a look at the demo because she's not going anywhere and you can enjoy that of an afternoon with a nice cup of tea. You can find me online on Instagram, and also I just recently got on Blue Sky because Avi bullied me into it at Sienna Tristen, Tristen. And also I have a website, siennatristen.com. I also have a newsletter, which I would love, love, love if you would subscribe to. It is called Missives from the Entmoot. You can find it through my website, and it is essentially 8 to 10 times a year ish. I send out a little love letter, a little mini essay. The title comes from, of course, that classic quote from Lord of the Rings from the Entmoot. It takes a long time to say anything in Old Entish, and we never say anything unless it is worth taking a long time to say. So that is at the heart of the newsletter, and I would love to see you there.
Fantastic. And as I told you before the recording, you're my first interviewee for what I hope will be a long
Congratulations to
running series.
you!
Yeah, and I'm so glad it could be you, someone like as smart and knowledgeable as you, with a book that I've read it like I read the first book now 1.5 times, so I know it
Mhm.
kind of well, and I love it dearly. And yeah, thank you for giving your time. It means quite a bit to me.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It has been an honor.
All right, well, I guess that's it. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I will hopefully see you later. Bye.
Take care.